Hal. I'm Hal. Please join me today, 240-363-7190. It's just me right now in the studio, shall we say, in our virtual. It's a virtual studio because people can be on the program as guests and not be in the same room, the same studio, which is, of course, very different than when I did radio. I love doing this program. I really do. It is, for me, a true labor of love, and that is why I do it. And I will keep doing it. But I have to admit, today I am glad it's Friday. I have been really brought down by this COVID thing. And I'm looking forward to a couple of days of just, nothing, doing very, very little. Actually made dinner last night for my wife, who's been working so hard, and I just feel bad for her because she's just killing herself right now at her job. So I was able well enough to cook. So I'm glad I was able to help out in that regard with respect to the household chores. But basically, except for preparing for this program and doing it, that's all I've really done that's productive in the past 3 days. Now, some might say that's not productive either, and that's fine if that's your opinion. But from my perspective, it's the only productive work I've done. This is going to be about cults of personality, and anti-cults. And I was really kind of interested in that idea of an anti-cult of personality. And cult of personality is because somebody says something, because of who they are, you believe them, because you have made a decision that this person is deserving, has earned your, I don't want to say, total devotion or obeisance, but they speak with tremendous authority. And if they say it, it's kind of true, right? I mean, that's what I view as someone you have a cult of personality. So the anti-cult of personality is the opposite. If somebody says something, it's just not true. It's just you don't believe it because they said it. You actually objectively refuse to believe something could be true if this person said that. And I think we see that in our politics, and it's very, very unfortunate. The anti-cult of personality goes beyond just simply refusing to believe someone, or the cult goes beyond simply believing them, but it's actually doing what they tell you to do. So in its most toxic form, you see a cult of personality like Jim Jones, where at that Jonestown, he got those people to, the phrase, drink the Kool-Aid. A lot of them drank that Kool-Aid voluntarily. Some apparently felt pressure to. They were forced to. They didn't really want to do it. So that's different than the cult of personality. But where you actually just do what somebody tells you because that's who they are, and they are in charge, large and in charge, and you just do what they say. And it's not even about fear. It's just they've instilled in you this sense of devotion and obedience. And so the anti-cult is basically we just do the opposite. Not just we don't believe them, we actually do the opposite of what they tell us is the right thing to do. And that's even when it hurts us, even when it's against our best interest. So I think we see that writ large in politics. It's not like it's a new thing. I mean, obviously, Hitler had a true cult of personality where the Nazi leadership and the people of Germany followed him into absolute, complete disaster for the world and for them as well. So that's, that's what we see. Those are the worst excesses, or the worst examples, most destructive examples on the global stage. Before we get into that, I do want to just, as I always like to do, I want to platform my really, really good friends at Climate Defiance. I saw this pop up actually after I had set out the topics for today's program in a promo. So they are in beautiful Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where I was a little over a year ago, and it is really, really beautiful. And I don't know if you can read that. Let me see if I can put this in a full screen here so that you don't have to, maybe you can see this a little bit bigger. I don't really know. Thank you. Well, I wrote thank you, Climate Defiance, for heroically challenging the financiers of the new Holocaust. I'm supposed to say that, right? According to my good friend Vernon, that's too, I guess, hyperbolic to call it a new Holocaust. I think it's accurate. So it's not about being hyperbolic. It's about just being as accurate as I can possibly be. And so they're there at this meeting of these central bankers, and they're going after them, and they're saying you have to stop funding these projects. And so far, well, let's just say the response hasn't been particularly warm and fuzzy. So here is just this morning, I believe, just posted. Very short video. I was thinking I should have been there so I could have at least videoed, because that's one of the things I do with these folk. I do for Climate Defiance is I do a lot of videoing for them, because I'm not really, well, you'll see what happens to this woman and you can kind of already get the vibe. But just in a few seconds, you get a sense of what happens to her. So I don't really want to have this happen to me. By the way, that looks just like the linoleum floor in my kitchen family room. So here we go. So you can see the sheriff there with his knee right on the protester, and they bring them both down, the woman and the man standing there. And it's really just ugly. It's just this is what happens, and they're not being violent. They're not being violent. Let me just see if we can get that, so I can put that on the screen right there. This is obviously not what you need to do, and it's just bullying by the police, bullying by a sheriff's office there, and doing the bidding of the elites, right? I mean, that deputy sheriff probably has a decent life. I'm sure the pay is pretty good if you're the Praetorian Guard. But still, there's no way that guy is living large and in charge. I guess he is large and in charge in that picture, but he's not. He doesn't have all the trappings, all the wealth, and his family won't either. But he is doing the bidding of those who are profiting off of our mother's absolute destruction. And I just give Climate Defiance all the props I can for taking on the financiers, the people who are actually helping, putting together the resources, the capital to do more drilling, to do more exploration, to now go into the Arctic because it's ice-free in the summers, and pretty soon will be ice-free, or at least won't be frozen completely over in the winters. So thank you. And again, climatedefiance.org, I believe. I hope you'll check them out. Let me just give this one more look here. If you can read that. We are in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. This was from earlier this morning. It was posted. So the 13 minutes was when I took the screenshot. That would have been an hour ago. So we're looking at, early the morning of August 25 in beautiful Jackson Hole. Jackson Hole is an area that has really seen the climate cataclysm writ large, with the massive glaciers that at one point you could, see going halfway down the mountains there, including the majestic Grand Teton now. Just a little bit of ice at the top. The melted ice melting ice at the top now in the summers. And I remember when I was there, and I believe it was 78 or 79. I still can't, I'm not sure which year it was. If I do the math, I'll figure it out. It was after I was, I guess that was before my junior year of high school. So that would have been 79. In 79, the glaciers were still much, much bigger. I guess they had suffered some climate crisis had already begun, but it was pretty de minimis at that point. And you could glissade or ski. I've talked about this before, glissade down those glaciers quite a ways. Now you can't at all. It's just all mud. And I remember this one specific glacier we visited, my wife and I did last summer. It's just a little bit of ice sort of on top of a mud. So that's Jackson Hole, and that is Climate Defiance taking on the New World Order. By the way, if you want to join me, 240-363-7190 this Friday, the free-for-all. Hope you will. Would love to talk to you. I know Arlen, who should be on this Monday, has made the point to me he wants more callers, and I guess he wants some callers, and so do I. Yes, I'm seeing some of my videos get bigger numbers, which is beautiful, but we do this. I do this because I want you to join me. And you know, one thing you might want to comment on is, what do you think of this headset with this boom mic? I'm just sort of holding it here. You may hear it. I hate that boom mic, but it's because you can use this headset as a microphone. I don't, because I'm using my professional Shure mic, which I brought with me actually when I moved, well, when I started commuting between East Coast, West Coast, while I was out and operating the radio station. KRXA 540 AM, think for yourself. When I was doing that, I bought a professional mic. Maybe I brought it. Maybe I had an extra one. I can't remember. I think I brought it and bought it here. And then I actually had to just get it replaced. And Shure was awesome. They basically sold me a new one for half price. So thank you, Shure, for that, because the old one stopped working. All right, let's get into this personality cult thing. Yeah, so this sort of came to an anti-cult. This sort of came to my mind when I was prepping for yesterday's show, which you should definitely check out if you want information about, if you want to hear kind of a back and forth. I wouldn't say it was aggressive or unpleasant, but certainly a disagreement about what path we should be following in Ukraine and Eastern Europe more generally. And I'm taking a much more pro-peace view. My guest yesterday, Bill Neal, who's extremely well-informed and extremely interesting, believes that we have an obligation to continue to provide materiel, munitions, and better munitions, better material, better training to Ukraine. We just fundamentally disagree. One thing, though, that came to my mind, one idea, was how the conflict is framed by those who support ongoing aid, and even, as Bill acknowledged, it's kind of a proxy war against Russia, which some recoil against. Oh, it's not a proxy war. It's not the U.S. versus Russia. It's Ukraine defending its sovereignty. One thing that really struck me when watching these videos is that defenders of the billions and billions of dollars that we're pouring into this little country that is halfway around the world, rather than pushing for peace. One thing that really struck me is the defenders of this policy have really tried to make, I mean, I don't know if they tried to. For them, this is all about taking on Putin. This is not about, a global conflict or Eastern Europe, or, who's going to have control of, an important place in Eastern Europe. It's simply, there's a bad guy. There's a strong man who is in charge of Russia, going back just like the czars, just like Stalin, and we have to stop him. And to me, that's an anti-cult of personality. This is a war. We have to stop Putin no matter what. And here's Anthony Blinken making this point. And let me just say before I play it, I just think that's not the right way to conduct foreign policy. I don't think it should be based on your personal view of a leader of another country. Sure, sometimes you say this person's really, really bad. We don't want them to take over more territory. I get that. But that shouldn't be the beginning and end of the conversation. That should be just one part of it. But in this situation, the fear, the hatred of Putin, the demonization of Putin seems to take precedence over Ukrainian lives, over the casualties, over the destruction of the country. It takes precedence over everything, to the point where we don't even discuss those issues when we discuss whether it makes sense to continue pushing Ukraine to fight to the last person, or to have some kind of a ceasefire that can lead to a lasting peace.
The United States, together with our allies and partners, is firmly committed to supporting Ukraine's defense today, tomorrow, for as long as it takes. And in America, this support is bipartisan. And precisely because we have no illusions about Putin's aspirations, we believe...
All right, so see, it's right there. It's about Putin's aspirations. It's not about what's really happening on the ground in Ukraine. It's not about the, casualties, the money that's wasted, the deaths, the families destroyed. It's not about anything. It's about Putin's aspirations. I don't get that. That's not how you conduct smart foreign policy.
The prerequisite for meaningful diplomacy and real peace is a stronger Ukraine, capable of deterring and defending against any future aggression.
All right, so he's saying we're not going to even talk to Putin. We're not going to agree to that unless we have a stronger Ukraine that can protect itself against foreign incursions. Well, that's an odd statement when you think about how this war is weakening Ukraine. It's losing. It's a war of attrition against a much more populous country that has much greater resources at its disposal, unless we and Germany, France has basically said, forget it, we don't want any more of this. So this is a war against Vlad Putin. That's what it boils down to for Anthony Blinken. And not just for, and he says it's bipartisan. Well, it's certainly true the Democrats are supporting it. There are Republicans who are against it, including Trump. It's an anti-cult of personality war. We've got to stop Putin. He's evil. He's the boogeyman. He's the demon. That's not smart politics. That's not smart policy. If you said, well, look, it's Hitler. It's the same thing. We got to stop Hitler. Okay, I get it. But at what point do you do that, and how do you stop them? Do you stop them by just keep funneling arms into one little country? Or do you gather them in a room, as Trump has said, and say, look, you don't get this. Stop it. You're already losing. You haven't won. You haven't taken over. When the problem that happened with Hitler, and I think we learned a lot of the wrong lessons, but one lesson that was correct was we should have been much more aggressive a lot earlier against Hitler. By the time we were fighting wars with him, it was too late. Well, now we're in a position where Putin's obviously been stalemated. Let's just end this war right now. No, we're not going to give you Ukraine. That's the difference. The Allies Chamberlain and Daladier gave Hitler Czechoslovakia, or the Czech part of Slovakia, the Sudetenland. That's not what we should be doing with Putin. But we also shouldn't be fighting an endless war. And finally, Putin isn't Hitler. Putin is not a genocidal maniac. It's just not the case. He just isn't. There's no reports of that. This guy is a very cynical, murderous person, no question about it. But he's not a genocidal maniac. All right, and that makes a lot of difference, to be perfectly honest with you. All right, here's another example of how the cult of personality is controlling what we do with our foreign policy, to the detriment of us, of course, and to the detriment, to a much greater degree, to the detriment of the people of Ukraine. And I'm not accepting the argument, well, they really want to fight. Well, look, they got a president who does. They've got neo-Nazis who do. I just can't believe the wives and children and husbands who've lost family members are feeling good about this war. Excuse me for a second. That was very unfortunate because that occurred while I had a terrible coughing fit. And I'm not getting Jamie's video there, which I don't really understand because it should be. But let me restart this thing one more time, see if we can get to work. Here we go.
To act in politics is by definition to take responsibility not only for advancing your ideals, but also for trying to confront in different ways the many threads of injustice and cruelty that make up the fabric of our world. And I'll give you an example of this. I'm a member of Congress who's been an ardent champion of the people of Ukraine in their extraordinary struggle to defend their national sovereignty and their democracy against the lawless and bloody imperial aggression of Vladimir Putin.
So again, you see, it's all about personality, lawless, bloody aggression of Vladimir Putin. And then he puts it in heroic terms, calling, and excuse me for my bad throat here, talking about the heroic efforts of Ukraine. So it's not about what's the best policy for the people there. It's not. It's just Ukraine is good. Ukraine good. We must support them. Putin bad. We must defeat him. Lawless, bloody, imperialist. Those aren't arguments. Those are just adjectives. A little more from Raskin here.
And I believe that the democratic nations and movements of the world and everyone supporting freedom and human rights and the rule of law have a deep interest in repelling and ending Russia's atrocity-filled aggression.
There's more atrocity-filled aggression. And I mean, look, you want to condemn Russia? No question. Is this the way to end the atrocities? Or is the way to end the atrocities, sit down, talk to Putin, figure out how we, using both sticks and carrots, incentivize him to stop the killing and stop the atrocities and hopefully get to a better place than we are right now. There's an assumption, of course, that we're sweet and good and light, and Putin is evil and dark and bitter. And maybe the latter's true, but we're hardly in a position to be so condescending and to be so arrogant about ourselves and our justifications as though they're somehow okay. But again, if you have an anti-cult of personality, all you have to do is say, look at Putin, now we need endless war. And this is what leads us to such bad decision-making. All right, here is my next topic. By the way, all on cult of personality. I hope you'll join me. 240-363-7190, because I am suffering here a little bit with a cold. I didn't think the cough was going to get me there, but it did. So this is what I have, COVID. I have a new strain, apparently. It's part of the Omicron family, which, came after some other, the Pi. I don't even friggin' know what the hell all that is. But we now have pretty good confidence. We can say with, we're not certain maybe, but the evidence has more and more shown that this is likely the lab leak, right? That Wuhan lab where they were studying bats, for example, and viruses, probably it got out of that lab where they didn't have great security. They didn't have all the important suits and everything that keep, the white suits that keep you completely, keep all the viruses within the lab. They weren't there. Apparently 3 technicians came down with COVID before anyone even knew what it was, long before there was reports that people who had been at the wet market got it. So I'm sick now because, Fauci and others green-lighted the study of viruses in Wuhan, and there wasn't good protections. And not only the study of them, but actually creating new strains. So that's where we are. And yet, despite the utter plausibility of that theory, and the fact that the evidence seems to support it, we heard for years that was absurd. It was a conspiracy theory. It was xenophobic. You can't even say it. That it could have originated in the lab. It definitely was this, as though like having a market where people chop the heads off of bats isn't somehow xenophobic. Saying it comes from the lab, which was funded in part by our tax money, that's you can't say. So here's what the New York Times, how it responded to the increasing support, even among, former skeptics for the lab leak hypothesis. The New York Times had been a champion of the wet market hypothesis and basically insisted it wasn't just a hypothesis, it was true. And here's what they had to say once the FBI and the Department of Energy said, no, we think we're pretty sure it was the lab leak. So the Times says, China's left scientists with incomplete evidence, all of it about a virus that may have jumped into people from, sorry, I've got the wrong slide here. What is going on? Why am I having trouble with this? Something weird about here we go. No. Sorry, folks. This is a little bit frustrating because I'm seeing different. Yeah, that's right. But now I'm looking at, well, let's go this way then. The story of the hunt for COVID's origins is partly about the stonewalling by China that has left scientists with incomplete evidence, all about a virus that's constantly changing. For all the data suggesting the virus is out of reach, that the virus may have jumped into people from wild animals at a Chinese market, conclusive proof remains out of reach, as it does for the competing lab leak hypothesis. All right, so first of all, the stonewalling by China would seem to be very strong evidence of the lab leak, right? Because the stonewalling suggests that they have something to hide, right? You don't hide something if you're not guilty, generally. I mean, not never, but most of the time you try to keep people from knowing the truth because you're afraid that the truth is going to make you look bad. And the truth, everyone knew they had these wet markets. So saying that's where it came from isn't nearly as bad as saying we were doing these experiments in a lab that led and we didn't do, we were creating viruses in labs, and then we didn't even take good enough care or security to prevent them from leaking out. So of course they're going to try to prevent people from knowing that. That's very strong evidence, in fact, in support of the lab leak hypothesis. Then the Times also goes to this point where they say, well, for all the data suggesting that the virus may have jumped into people from wild animals at a Chinese market, what evidence is that? I don't think there's any evidence. There's no data. What data are they talking about? The data is, that it started in Wuhan. But the lab is in Wuhan also. And they have failed to find any like patient zero from that Wuhan market. Nobody's been identified. Apparently, they took all these samples from that market and they couldn't find any that showed, an example of a bat or some other animal. They had these raccoon dogs, but those raccoon dogs apparently had gotten sick long after the epidemic had begun. So why is the Times getting it so wrong? Why is it getting it so wrong? And why did others get it so wrong? And to give the newspaper its credit, again, this is a cult of anti-personality because, and they admit it. I mean, it's hard to, it's hard for me to understand this, but they actually admit how they screwed up. So let's see if we can get this in. I think it should work. I don't see why not. Let's see. We had a problem before. They're talking about the lab leak, and they really can't acknowledge that the lab leak is almost certainly correct. So they're trying, but they're acknowledging at least that the wet market theory isn't definitive, that there may and maybe it really did come from this lab. So now, why didn't we get it right earlier? Why was there so many people wrong? So some Republicans grew fixated on the idea of a lab leak after former President Trump raised it. Excuse me. So they can't say, well, maybe the Republicans were just right. Instead, they only supported it. They're the members of the personality cult. They only supported it because Trump raised it. And then Democrats, because Trump raised it, refused to believe it. But they at least had a reason. So again, the Times has to justify the Democrats getting it wrong or demonize the Republicans for getting it right. The Republicans only were fixated, even that word is tendentious and critical, were only fixated on a lab leak because Trump supported it. And then Democrats rightly were skeptical because they viewed it as an effort by Trump to distract his administration's from his administration's many failings. So even there, despite the fact that the Republicans were right to talk about the lab leak and the Democrats were wrong to mock it, the Times has to justify what the Democrats did and criticize what the Republicans did. But they acknowledge this is all about the cult of anti-personality. Because Trump suggested it, and by the way was right, the Democrats had to, although according to the New York Times, rightly so, reject the idea altogether. All right, so one more point about Trump and the cult of anti-personality. Trump was, I guess he was charged yesterday, is that right, in Atlanta, I believe? And the NBC reports Merry Arrestmas. All these Democrats are gleeful at his arrest. Now, this is not a happy moment. We shouldn't be happy or excited. I mean, you be happy if you want. I mean, I guess feelings are feelings. If you want to be happy, go ahead. But this is not a good thing. I don't want to have to look at a president as someone who is a crook, who's someone who goes to jail. It's not just an embarrassment, it's a shame. Now, do I think he should have been indicted and arraigned? Yeah. I think the Georgia case is very strong. I think he broke the law. But I'm not going to be gleeful about it. I'm going to be sad. I'm saddened by it. I'm saddened that we've reached a point in our society where we elect somebody, and I understandably so, why we elect somebody like Donald Trump, because the two major political parties have done such an awful job of nominating decent, caring, intelligent, progressive people. but have consistently focused on apparatchiks and useful idiots and people who are going to carry water for the elites. The choices have been so bad that Americans understandably, although I still would say I would posit wrongly, turn to Trump. But what are you going to do? Your choice is between Trump and Hillary. You got no choice. It's a Hobson's choice. Vote for Jill Stein. This year, vote for, or next year, please vote for Cornel West. So the cult of anti-personality. By the way, I didn't mention this, but Matt Taibbi, I thought of that term, cult of anti-personality. Yeah, cult of personality. So I thought of that term when I was reading. No, I thought of it myself, but then I Googled it, and I found that Matt Taibbi had used it, I think, very, very well in 2009 to describe how many were responding to Barack Obama, just like he could do no right. Whatever Barack Obama did, he was going to get attacked for it, and in many kind of bizarre, incoherent ways. And Taibbi did a really nice job in Rolling Stone pointing this out. He also pointed out that there were lots of good reasons to criticize Obama, but the ones that critics like Martin Peretz of the New Republic chose clearly showed some form of derangement, some clearly an emotion of just, we hate this guy. We've got to, everything he does is wrong, or we're going to pick out, it's like the same thing with Trump. There were lots of reasons to go after Trump. I always thought the worst thing he did was the separating the families at the border, and I do believe that violated the Constitution. I think he should have been charged with that by Democrats. That would have been the reason to impeach him, not for this ridiculous Russiagate nonsense. But, they had to try to explain why they lost the election in 2016. It sure couldn't be because they picked a terrible candidate whose policies were harmful to the American public, because that would require them to change their policies. So who's happy? Who's gleeful? Well, this woman, Rachel Byte-Kofer, and I got this, by the way, from the NBC article there, Mary Erasmus. She's apparently a Democratic operative. Nice caption, the best day I've had in 7.5 years, and there's the little rainbow. Yeah, I don't get that, really. That's having Trump arrested is the best day you've had in 7. If that's the best day you've had, that's a cult of anti-personality. That means just the opposite of, somebody can do no wrong. You're saying this guy is so completely evil, and is also, it's not just, look, if a Supreme Court justice, like if an Alito or a Clarence Thomas dies, I'm not going to there's not going to be no mourning. I was not sorry when Scalia died. Not in the least. I mean, I'm sorry that he was replaced by, I guess, I don't know who did. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But I think it was a Republican. Because they stonewalled, because McConnell stonewalled Merrick Garland, and then I guess it was it Kavanaugh or was it Gorsuch? I don't know which one came first. I think it was Gorsuch. No, I was not unhappy. I did not have any. I mean, I was, I would be pleased if a Scalia or an Alito or a Thomas died and a Democrat got to replace them on the Supreme Court, because they're currently doing real harm to our country. I think Trump is doing harm to our country, but I can't say having him arrested is bringing me a lot of joy. I mean, it's just sad. It's just a sad kind of, dynamic in our society, in our country, that we have this kind of politics. So for Byte-Kofer to be, this is the greatest day I've had in 7 years, very, very strange to me. Very strange. And then more here. Let's see if we can get another slide up. I just want to show. Let's see if we'll do it this way. And I'm sorry, I'm struggling a little bit. So this is from, and this doesn't look good. So this is the president's niece, Mary Trump. She says on Twitter, right now all I can say is I'm focused on how effing awesome. How does she feel? Effing awesome. Happy Indictment Day. Well, I kind of sort of think that's a little bit less crazy than Byte-Kofer, because at least I guess Mary Trump knows her dad, or her uncle, and she might have some real personal reasons. So maybe that's a little more understandable. But again, we're still talking about, this is somebody who's in my head, right? They're so bad that I'm couldn't be happier that they're indicted. Now, maybe he molested her, right? Something like that. I would say, okay, yeah. You want somebody who's done harm to you physically, emotionally, personally harm to you, bullied you. I get it. I get that happiness. But for, the rest of us, it's really just more sad. It's more pathetic. It's not something that you take great joy in unless you're in a cult of anti-personality. All right, finally, let's go from the cults of anti-personality with which I've been critical. And I'm sorry, folks, this cough is it's awful. I thought I didn't think I would have this problem. I should have been using a lozenge. So my good friend, I don't know, I never met her, but I'd like to think, hopefully, if we ever did meet, she'd be my friend. More from Brianna Joy Gray. And I really was intrigued by this. She did this yesterday. This is, you might want to check this out. So she's got some DSA leaders on and asking them about whether the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, are going to go after the squad in Congress who have, consistently failed to champion the progressive policies that they were elected to push, to promote. And so Brianna Joy Gray is going to ask these two guys some pretty, I think, tough questions. And let's just hear a little bit of it, and then I'll address it, and then I'll wish you a great weekend.
Hey, which is supposed to be the largest and premier socialist organization in the United States of America, who understands the power structures at play here and understands the corrupting influence of politics, and is outside of politics for that very reason, in part. Why is there any influence at all on DSA for what Hakeem Jeffries tells to AOC or what Nancy Pelosi says to Ilhan Omar?
I don't understand your question so well. Sorry. As in,
Philip is articulating the idea that the DSA leadership has been under pressure since Biden was elected to be supportive of the Democratic Party and not be an adversarial organization. And I
think he meant the electeds.
Yes. I was thinking about the electeds.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Sorry. All right. Fair enough. So then my question is this. Even there has been not a single moment, as far as I can tell, but let me know if I've missed something, where when the electeds do start to flag and be susceptible to
the electeds, she's talking about, they're talking about the squad, right? The DSA members who have been elected to Congress, meaning AOC, Tlaib, I think Ilhan Omar will play a little more, but she's saying, are you taking them on? Are you going after these people who are your members but don't seem to pursue the policies that DSA is committed to?
The kind of influence you're describing. There have been very few moments where there has been a tension, like an open fissure between DSA as an organization and those electeds. And only recently have we been having these conversations about, there was the challenge, the effort to potentially kick Jamal Bowman out. There was this more recent incident with the Massachusetts, who was it?
Some state legislator in
some state, Mike Connolly. Yeah, Mike Connolly, who there was a petition to expel him for various reasons. But this is now 3 years into the Biden administration. And I guess my question is, to the extent that you can talk about it, like, have there been any internal conversations about whether or not the organization was going to make an effort to be critical of openly some of the choices that have been made of these electeds?
I think there have been a ton of conversations. I mean, obviously, as you alluded to, last year, Jamal Bowman was unendorsed by the organization, and there was an incredible amount of internal conflict over that. And this year, after the rail vote, DSA nationally released a statement explaining our position is very different from the position of the federal electeds. And I think that tension exists every single day. If you're asking, why are we so reluctant sometimes to be so viciously critical?
Well,
I mean, I can say...
vicious isn't the word that I would use. I would just say honestly critical.
I would say, one, DSA, as we said in the beginning, is a very, very diverse group of people with lots of different opinions. And so there's, it's tough for us to figure out our internal position on things at times. But two, when it comes to AOC and Rashida Tlaib and Cori Bush, those are our three nationally endorsed socialists in office, electeds. I think they remain incredibly potent spokespeople. And
so there it is. That's what I was aiming for. Those three are incredibly potent spokespeople. So they're a personality. We have got a cult of personality around because of what they say. It's not because of what they do. And at one point, he acknowledges on the clip, and I think it's that guy with the beard, says, I've had to learn it's not what you say, it's what you do. People don't care what you say, they care what you do. But right here, he's saying, no, we care what you say. What you say makes you powerful. We believe you, regardless of what you do. That's a cult of personality.
And we have to, from my perspective at least, AOC brought me into this organization, right? She speaks really potently.
She's my, lodestar. She's my pole star. She brought me in. That's a cult of personality. That's got nothing to do in the end with whether she's on your side, whether her policies are your policies.
To a lot of working class people like myself, she made an incredible amount of sense to me. She's the reason I joined DSA. And this is not to say I have a personal allegiance to her or I want to defend her specifically.
She's the reason I joined as well in 2018.
So what I'm trying to say here is there is that interpersonal desire sometimes when we get frustrated and disappointed with their votes, and really we should be a lot more critical. And I really do believe that we should be a party that has that committee that's talking with them and criticizing them directly and preventing these things from happening. But then even so publicly, the random person on the street sees AOC and says, oh, that's a radical socialist. And some people see her and like, that's a radical socialist, and I think I like that. And then a lot of people see her and say, no, I don't think I like that. But she remains this incredible resource, this tool for the organization. And we can't get stuck into, well, she has individually made a ton of bad votes and it's time to cut her loose. But what are the structures that DSA has that can help rein her in, help pull her into better votes? All right,
I'm going to stop it there because it just, gets into this kind of nonsense. But the point is DSA views her as a cash cow, somebody who brings people into the organization, helps them fundraise, and it's what she says, not what she does. It's not a ton of bad votes that will cut her loose. It's that she says things that people like what she has to say. And as long as we on the left make decisions based on personalities, we hate Trump, so therefore, if he says COVID came from a lab, it didn't. And not only that, he's a racist, so it's racist against Chinese. We hate Putin, so we're just going to keep fighting to the last Ukrainian, no matter how much it costs us or them. We love AOC, so if she doesn't vote for striking rail workers, it probably wasn't the right vote. As long as we take that attitude, we'll lose. We'll lose. We'll lose because we'll be supporting policies that are bad. All right, have a great weekend. I hope I'm better by Monday. I'm expecting to be a little bit better. And you have, just stay safe.